Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build of the pair of Skymaster F4 aircraft. This is video number 9 in the build video series, and it will be the final video for these aircraft. Doesn't matter how long this ends up being, this is going to be the last video. So in this video, we are finishing up the front ends. On the old aircraft, we've already done that. The new aircraft, we've got a little bit left to do. We've got to run a couple more lines and things like that. We have to get the chutes installed, which is a huge positive. The new aircraft, last video we picked up some stainless steel turkey feathers. We found them, so those are going to be installed in the new aircraft as well too. And we've got to do our engine run-ups and any final programming and stuff like that. So this video is probably going to be quite detailed for some things. Some things will be very basic, but thanks guys. Stay tuned. Don't forget to give the video one of these. Hit that subscribe button down below. Stay tuned, and we will hop back into finishing up these F4s. Okay, so last video we got a set of stainless steel turkey feathers. We're going to get those installed, but before we do, we're going to get the chute mechanism or chute mounting points fastened in the plane. So pretty straightforward for that. We basically have this cable here, and you can see that's our mounting right there. So we need to put a hardwood piece of wood with probably an I-clip in there, and we need to do that on both aircraft. So we're going to get that done first so the glue can cure, and after that we'll start working on some other things. All right guys, so we're going to get our piece of wood mounted in the bottom of the fuselage there. Now you have to be mindful of the amount of space you have, because the chute receptacle, it does obviously need some room in there. So initially I did some measuring with a piece of plywood, quarter-inch, half-inch piece of plywood. Now the half-inch piece of plywood would be too tall to allow the receptacle to actually fit in. So what we'll use is we'll use a quarter-inch piece of maple, and we'll screw our eye hooks into that. Now I'm going to leave these eye hooks open so we can put the chute on there and then just close them with a pair of pliers. So that's my plan. So I'm just going to do a couple things here. I'm going to drill a hole, get the hook mounted, make sure I put some CA in there on both of them, and then we will get this glued in with some high sol. Some 9462 is what we're going to be using in this situation. All right guys, so we're getting ready to install our chutes from RC Jet Chutes. Again, I know I talked about this in the last video, but top quality chutes, very impressive. I'm extremely impressive. I've never seen one of their chutes before, so rcjetchutes.com, and there is their email address right there, rcjetchutes@gmail.com. RC Jet Chutes, well done. These things are beautiful. Okay, so it's been a couple hours, and our piece of material that we glued inside there is stiff enough that we can work with it. So I have hooked up my chute, and then I just took a pair of needle nose pliers and squished the hook with the needle nose pliers. And now we've got our chute hanging out the back of the aircraft. So what we need to do is install our receiver here. Now our receiver, this one didn't have the hole cut in the bottom, so I just took my Dremel, put a little notch in the bottom. This is where the cord passes through, and this is the top of the unit here. So what we need to do now is get this reinstalled and screw it back into place, and then we'll be ready to put our chute inside, and that's it. All right, so just working on the rear hatches here, and I already installed the one on the old aircraft, on my aircraft, and I wasn't hardly getting enough movement of the elevator. So what I did was line up these two side by side, and basically marked out the new one compared to the old one. And you can see the amount that we need to take off in order to get good travel on the horizontal stab. So I'm just going to Dremel this black area out, and then we will be able to get these guys installed. All right, so we've got our chute all installed, and let's see what happens. This is the first try. That's cool. All right, so looking at wrapping up the rear end of the new aircraft here, and just put the bottom hatch on. See it there? And redid my marks here. So from the build thread on RC Universe, elevator neutral is 52 millimeters down from that panel joint, so which is where that center mark is. And then I've marked 40 mils up, 40 mils down. Now we can get lots of, well, this is actually elevator down travel, but we can get lots of this travel, but elevator up, we're limited to about 35 is kind of what it is. So the reason for that is this hatch cover back here, we need to do a little bit more sanding on it. On the old aircraft, we matched the hatch cover to the new one and it fits fine. So it's just different geometries in the back end. So I'm gonna take the hatch cover back off and we're just gonna do a little bit of sanding in that area right there. All right, so we got our elevator covers installed on both sides, and we have our tail hook installed. Now the tail hook needs to be removable like I've mentioned, so we just used 2 screws. Previously, when we were working on the back end of this plane, I glued in some wood right here knowing that I would use 2 screws to hold those in place. So that's the reason we did it. Next thing we're working on is the new turkey feathers. I'll show you guys this stuff. This gets a little bit technical, a little hard to explain, but I'll do my best to explain it to you. So you can see this wood here. I glued this wood in with Hysol last night. Now the reason I glued that wood in, it's actually going to be easier to show you on the aileron here because the aileron is a flipped version of the flap, right? So the flap is down there. So we've got a skin hinge, okay? And that wood section right here is behind the skin hinge and before you get to the vertical piece of structure in the surface. So basically you've got a section of about, I'll show you here on the calipers. So you got a section of about 1 centimeter, 10 millimeters. That's just skin or fiberglass, and in this case foam. Now this, on the flaps here, it was half foam and then half just fiberglass. Well, what had happened was at some point during probably transport, or maybe it was just like that, this ended up being soft. So the hinge line is still perfect. Nothing wrong with the hinge line, but this section right here was soft. So what would happen was when the flaps were down like this and the servo was activated, you could take the flaps and you could wiggle them, and that material behind the hinge line would actually flex. And then when the flap was up like this, you could take the flap and you could actually twist the entire flap. So it still does it a little bit, but that's just movement in the actual hinge line. All hinge pieces will do that, like you can see it moving right there. Okay, so that's why I put that piece of wood on there. It's just like 1/16 inch ply, ran Hysol all the way across. I took a Q-tip with alcohol, cleaned up the hinge line so it would be no problem, and that solved our issues with the flaps. We did both of the flaps. One of those little preventative measures. Now, if the actual skin hinge line had an issue, then we'd need to deal with it and put physical hinges in. But in this case, the hinge material is still perfect. It was just that soft section of material. Now, I probably could have gotten away not doing this stuff, but it's one of those things, just like the rudder, I'm not happy with it. I'm not going to let it slip by. I'm going to do something about it because it makes me feel more confident about the plane. So just wanted to share that with you guys. If you have any questions about it, email me or comment down below, but I think it's pretty straightforward stuff. All right, so a couple things. Number one, we got the turkey feathers installed, the stainless ones, and dang, those finish off this kit just beautifully. Oh my gosh, those look so good. Those really, really make that back end section pop. Looks really good. Okay, so we got the aircraft on the RC CG machine and on our Xicoy scales, and this is going to be interesting because this airplane's a little bit of a different setup, but we are exactly the same weight as the old kit. with the CG basically where it needs to be. So the only thing that's really a bit of a difference with this kit is because our tanks are in front of our CG point, so our CG point is about here. Okay, so right where that tube comes down. Now our tanks start about 3 inches in front of that, and they go to about this point right there. So you've got all 3 fuel tanks sitting in front of the CG. So really, this is just what I just showed you there is just kind of an initial. What we really need to do when we CG this plane is we need to put a landing amount of fuel in those tanks. So when we fill up our fuel system here, it's going to fill both of those lower tanks. So we want to put whatever amount we're going to be landing with in there. So probably, you know, about maybe 1 inch or so at least in each of those tanks. So what I'm going to do is I just wanted to get to this point so we could kind of see what was going on. But really, we need to put some fuel in those tanks, see how that affects everything, and adjust it from there. Because if you do it this way, the plane's going to be nose heavy all the time, right? So what we'll do next is we'll put some landing amount of fuel in this aircraft, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so what I've done is I've put about 1 inch of fuel in each of the tanks, and what that equates to is we've put 1 liter of fuel right there in the fuel system. So we've got ½ a liter in one tank, ½ a liter in the other tank. So that's going to affect our center of gravity on this aircraft. So what we've got set up here is we've got 2 3-cell lipos. Those are for the receiver for the Central Box 300. And then we've got 2 2-cell lipos that are going to be for the turbines. So what we've done here is we've put a 3-cell lipo in there, some weights. That's just to simulate the weight. So we'll see how this affects everything. So we'll disconnect our fueling system and we will check and see what the effect is. All right, so we've got it right within the range here. So I know it says tail heavy, but it's 0.04 pounds. So that is good. I'll show you what our final weight is here. This is going to be obviously with 1 liter of fuel in the fuel system. So we're 40.45 pounds. Not really, it doesn't really matter. I'm just showing you guys just so you can see it. So now how this actually played out here is... So the way the batteries were organized is we've got our 3-cell lipos plugging in on this side. So we can have one of the batteries back here, one of the batteries in the front tray, and then we'll have the 2-cell lipos for the turbines here on that side. So one will go back here, one will go in the nose. So what I ended up balancing this with is 3 strips of weight in the nose, 3 strips of weight back here. So now we'll weigh these strips and find out how much battery weight we can add for each of the turbine batteries. All right, guys, so we've got exactly 6 liters of fuel in the system here. So the tanks are full, and the reason we're doing a full tank test is number 1, just to see the all-up weight, and also see how it affects the center of gravity of the aircraft as well. So I'll put the hatches and everything back on, and we'll take a look at the numbers. Okay, so the all-up weight with a full system of fuel is 49.75 pounds, so it is significantly heavier, about just over 10 pounds. And then our CG point here, so we are 1.5 pounds nose heavy. So that means this CG mark here, or this CG reference, we're at 335 for our measurements. So we are 31 millimeters in front of that point. So with a full setup of fuel, our CG is at 304 is where it comes out to be. So yeah, with a full fuel system, we're 31 millimeters in front. So that information is more just to have it, and so we know what's going on here. But we've got all the information that we need for this aircraft. So I think we're going to do a little bit more organizing in the front end here, figure out some of the battery stuff, and then it's time to test run this, this twin, and then also the old single. All right, so we got all of our battery mounting dealt with. So we put 2 strips of Velcro and a strap in the front there. One of the downsides with using the texture coat is if you put stuff like Velcro on there, it's going to peel up and it's going to peel the texture coat off. So all I do is take a little plane, a little razor blade essentially, and scratch all the coating off. And that keeps it nice and sticky. And then we've got 2 pieces of Velcro on each side with a strap run through the board. So now we've got all of our battery stuff dealt with, and we also have our keepers that are included on the Central Box 300 series. We've got the 2 side ones installed. We haven't put the front one on yet because we're going to be messing with that stuff. So all the servo leads though, we kept those. They're not going to change, so we're just leaving those as is. So we are ready to fire up the new aircraft with the engines. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this aircraft on. We're going to prime each of the fuel systems. So we still have lots to complete on both of these aircraft once we're done. A few of the things that we need to do still is we are going to be changing the name on the canopy. We need to paint the Ordinance green. We have some programming still to do on both of them. So still quite a few little things to do, but let's get these engines set up and test run. All right, guys, we are ready to run these engines, and it's going to be fun. Pretty awesome. Yeah, those are going to be, that's going to be tons of fuel for that thing.
And it's got lots of power.
Oh yeah, the power is crazy. Like that used a liter of fuel on that run. All right, so everything went well with the new aircraft. Tons of power. As Ward was holding the front end there, I got a chance to hold it as well too. And lots of push, very, very impressive. We also, I don't know if I'm going to include the clips or not, but I was just checking the temperature of like the stab and underneath the, or over top of the exhaust or the turkey feathers and stuff like that, and everything, everything looks fine with it. The area just above the tail hook got a little bit like warm to the touch, but it's not, not hot at all. And tons of power in this thing. So that's really cool. This is gonna be a fun aircraft. So everything went well with the engine run up, and happy. So also did the nose extension. I think hopefully I caught that on camera here at the end, and it looks wonderful. All right, guys, we are ready to test run the old aircraft with a single SWIWIN 220. So fuel system's been primed. When I primed this, I shot quite a bit of fuel into the turbine, so it may be a bit of a hot start, but if it is, that's why. All right, so we'll do a gear cycle here just to, I guess, double check. I've got to extend the nose wheel, otherwise it will not do its thing. Okay, up. Ready?
Yep.
Gears away. Doors are closed. You're shaking back there. Doors are open. Doors down. So one thing I noticed on the old aircraft is that, I mean, these legs are quite a few years old, and with a full load of fuel, we get about 75% of our leg compression, which we don't want. So the access for filling up the air on these legs is through the top of the leg itself. So you just have to undo the trunnion bolt and fill it up through the top there. So we're going to add a bit of air to those main legs. I don't know how much at this point, but that's one of the things that we need to do on this one. On the other aircraft, the new aircraft, everything is good. The pressure in there seems like it's perfect. So. Okay, so a couple things that we're doing here. We're getting into the fine details of these aircraft. So we added a little bit of aileron differential because you're dealing with a skin hinge here. You're going to have more travel one way than the other. So went in, and on the right aileron we added like 4% aileron differential. So now we're getting 26 mils up and down exactly. On the left aileron we had to do a little bit of a different number, but now we've got the equal amount of travel in both directions. The other thing we did was pair the nose up to the flap switch. So we use conditions. I'll go through that quickly as well. But what happens is when we go to mid flaps, our nose wheel extends. So with the aileron differential, because we're global, we've got S1, which is, we know is number one is always our left surface. So we've got our left aileron is at 7%. And our right aileron is at 4%. So that gives us perfectly matched travel between those two. And then what we did was go into advanced properties, logical switches. We made a logical switch for the nose. Now, probably didn't need to go this route, but it allows us future opportunities to make different conditions. So we've got nose number one is the logical switch, and we've got it both on control number 2, which is SD mid-flap switch. So that's set up there. And then we went into the function assignments to our nose leg, and we put it as logical switch number 2. So when we are in any other position other than mid-flaps, we are no air in the nose wheel. All right, guys, I'm going to keep this as simple as possible. This is chute programming for the F4 on a JETI system. So a couple things we wanted to do. Number one, we want to set up a whole bunch of conditions saying that we want our flaps to be full, our turbine to be at idle or below a certain RPM. We want an arming switch, which is our back switch here, to be in the armed position for our chute to release. So let's go over quickly how we actually make that happen. So first thing we have to do is our telemetry is set up in our radio and all that kind of stuff. So we've got access to the turbine RPM. So we'll go to advanced properties, telemetry controls, and we create a switch in the telemetry control with the RPM. So turbine RPM, it's enabled. Sensor is a SWIWIN RPM. Type of control is a switch. Condition, this turbine idles at 38,000 RPM, so we set it to 38,000 plus or minus 2,000. Now I'm going to play with this and maybe bump that up to 40, and that's creating the switch for telemetry control. And then we're going to go into logical switches, and we're going to create our first logical switch, which is a chute. So we've labeled that chute, it's enabled, and we've got two controls here. Number one control is our flap switch. So flaps have to be in the full flap position. Control 2 is MX1, which is our telemetry switch we just created. So because our plane is off, this condition is being met. We need it to be an AND condition, and we've got a check mark there. So first logical switch is good. Then we create a second logical switch, which we've labeled chute number 2. And in order for these to be met, we need control 1, which is logical switch 3, the one we just created. So if that logical switch is not met, that's a red X. So that logical switch is met. And then our last control here is our activation switch, which is right there. So we can either, the chute will either release when you come down to idle and your RPM actually falls to idle, or when you flick your activation switch. You have a couple different controls there. So very, very cool. One of the things I love about JETI is all these logical type things. Still wrapping my brain around this stuff. All right, so we're just making some good progress on both of these aircraft. So the old one here, we got all the Ordinance installed in. Oh dang, does that ever look mean? Yep, there she is. All right, and landing gear worked out really well. So on the new aircraft, which is what you're looking at right now, we have the restrictors installed on the doors and the gear itself. So it actually turned out quite nice. So the gear comes up nice and slow, doesn't slam up. And doors close nicely as well. And we'll drop the gear, doors open, and gear comes down, and same thing, the gear doesn't slam down, which is great. So nice to see, and that's operating at about 90 PSI. There we go. All right, so some of our final details here. We're just getting the Ordinance painted. I've been working on this over the last couple days here, and we're just getting all that stuff organized. So that's in progress. And we are doing some organizing on the aircraft itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug the sequencer, or the little screen, into the Xicoy sequencer, and we're going to tighten up the gear sequence a little bit, because the doors open and the gear takes, I don't know, 4 seconds before the gear comes down, and we can tighten that that detail up. Got our sticker installed, built by the lighter side of RC, and that is getting close. We got our paint touch-ups to do as well too. I'm just going to take some different grays, and we're going to go through here and touch up some of this stuff. We got the reds touched up yesterday on the rudder, and we'll touch up some of the gray as well too. We've got a sort of a close match to this color back here. So kind of just going through and doing all the little tiny small details throughout the aircraft. The old one doesn't really need much of anything. So we've got to put one more coat of paint on the chute cover there, but really close to having these guys done. On the Ordinance for the new aircraft, so we painted them green now. We're just going to paint the tips yellow like that as well too. So yeah, the finer details of everything. And then once our Ordinance is ready to go, we'll get the Ordinance mounted on this aircraft as well. And just a little note here, one of the things I noticed on the old aircraft pylons is generally on one side would be a hard, like a wood support. On the other side would be kind of flexible. So in this case right here, like this is flexible, on the other side is not. But so on the old aircraft, I kind of had to put the bolts in based on what side had the rigid piece. So on the drop tanks here, for example, the left drop tank, actually needed to screw them in from the inside of the aircraft. And on the right drop tank, screwed them in from the outside, because that's just where the supports happen to be. Now when I feel the new pylons, it feels like we've got support on both sides. So all right, guys, I got the time tightened up on the gear a little bit, between the gear and the doors. So what I'm doing now is I'm setting up the fail-safe pressure on the landing gear. So I've cycled it, this is 4 times now. So we're at 96-ish at full. After 4 times, we're down to 73. And all I'm doing at this point is just seeing where I can get it as a reliable drop down. So now we're at 69 PSI. So we'll see if it still drops down at 69. So still coming down at 69. Now we're down to 65. So we'll try cycling up one more time. So still working perfect. Go down. So still cycles perfect at 60 PSI. So basically this is the process. I'm just going to go through and see how many cycles and how low we can actually get this thing. And then what I'll do is that gives me an idea of where we can set our fail-safe and have it be reliable. So if it still cycles at 55, yeah, it still cycles fine at 50, 55, so. This is also a nice test just to see how reliable this gear is at low pressure. Oh, there we go. Oh, it still comes down, but it struggled. So what that tells me is if we set our fail-safe in the Xicoy sequencer at 60 PSI, that'll be good. Okay, so now we want to prove that it actually works. So we're in the gear down condition. We've got 82 PSI. So what we'll do is we'll go to our gear up position. So we're at 76 PSI. Now we're just going to keep cycling like the brakes as an example. Okay, so we didn't have our brakes set up on any way to operate it. So right now our wheel brakes are set up on this switch right here, which is where I usually put it. So anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to bleed this off now to 65 PSI. So, and then we'll confirm that the fail-safe works. So we're getting close now. There we go, 65 PSI. And our fail-safe works. So now we've proven that that works. So now we're pressure fail-safe, 60 PSI, perfect. All right guys, so this is the time when we start chasing gremlins on these builds. I don't often share this stuff. Sometimes we're dealing it with in the first flights, but I've had these airplanes together enough to be able to deal with these gremlins. So here's what's happening. I've got the plane raised up on the rear and the front, and this gear, the right main gear, isn't retracting. So I've pulled the wing off and put a very small amount of air in the red line, and it goes up absolutely no problem at all. So the only thing that I can think of is the restrictor on the gear system. So we're going to take the restrictor out. I'll show you the other thing that's happening with the compressor. So I'm going to turn this plane on, and the compressor is going to be loud here for a sec. So what's happening here is this is the pressure readout at our sequencer, and this is the pressure in the system. This is the pressure of the compressor. Now you got to remember that we have the compressor, a piece of Teflon line, and a one-way valve. So after the one-way valve is the pressure in the system. On this side of the one-way valve is the pressure in the V-speak in the compressor. So you can see here the pressure is holding perfectly, no problem. We can leave it on for 10-15 minutes and it stays exactly the same. But the V-speak pressure is dropping. Now, this could be the pressure going back through the compressor, or it could also be a small leak between the end of the compressor and that one-way valve, or the check valve, I guess is the better word. So what we're going to do is, because we're going to take the front end apart, we're just going to redo those connections on the Teflon line and stuff just to make sure. But that's what's going on. If yours is doing this, I've seen it sometimes where the compressor keeps turning on and off just because the sensor is, I don't know what you'd call it, but the sensor's kind of funny. And in this case, like we're holding 5.7, 5.6 pretty well, but it does drop slowly, kick on for a second. And the reason it only goes for a second is because on the other side of that one-way valve, you've got 97 PSI sitting there. What we're going to do is we're going to take this front end apart. We're going to check that compressor connection, which is on this side. We're probably going to take that the restrictor, airline restrictor, off the gear system. I'll show you here what I'm talking about. So the other gear has gone up. That gear hasn't moved. All right, and one more gremlin to deal with. We've talked about the air things that we need to fix. I've taken all the ordnance off just so we have better access to everything. So on the twin kit, you can see the gap there between the wing and the root of the wing at the fuselage. That is a problem. Now, I'll tell you why this is a problem. Well, it's a problem because you can't have that. I can take this wing and move it in and out. On the old kit, or the single kits, you won't have that issue because you've got the same capture on the front here. So the standard Skymaster tab, put a bolt through the bottom of the fuselage, goes through the aluminum tab, that holds it in place. The only downside with the new kit compared to the old kit has, or the, I shouldn't say old, but the single kit has like a quarter wing tube that comes out here, goes through a clamp. You do up the clamp right on each side of the fuselage. So you've got the wing is captured rear and front. The twin turbine setup, that's a problem. So what we're going to do is, fortunately we've got decent access down here in the wheel well, and what we're going to do is we're going to put a system where we do a bolt up through the wheel well that goes into the fuselage. So got some ideas there. It may be a little bit tricky on the fuselage side because that area is right by the turbine. Now I've got some different fastening options. If I use a standard blind nut, I'll need to get back here. If I use a thread-in nut and I use some high sol to thread it in, that's an option as well too. So I've got a few different options. It's going to be more about accessibility, existing materials, that kind of stuff. So one more gremlin to deal with. If you're building a twin F4, this size, 1 to 7.75 scale, this is going to be a problem. All right, so working on the wing bolts here. So we put a piece of carbon in last night. I got this all shaped and fit and everything, and you can see the hole there. What I did here was with the wings on the aircraft, I reached in here with a pin vise, drilled through this, and just made a mark on the fuselage side so we know where everything lines up. Now, the reason we have to put carbon reinforcing in here is because this is just foam. Right, all this is just foam, so not strong at all. Now the carbon is laminated against the foam, but more importantly, it is laminated against the top skin and bottom skin of the wings. So now when we tighten up those bolts, this is really strong. So what we can do now is we can drill this hole out on both of the wings. And then on the fuselage itself, there's our little mark right there for where our hole needs to go. So we're going to end up drilling this out. We got to pull the engines out to get access. We got to take our heat plates out, and then we're going to put a blind nut back here, and we're going to keep it all universal. So our wing bolts are this size here, so we're going to use the exact same size blind nuts for this area. So at least we only need one Allen key to put everything together. So next step, we got to pull the engines out and work on this stuff. All right, so we got our blind nuts installed here. Also put some high sol on them so they don't back out. Just waiting for the high sol to kind of kick off before we put these wings on, but that turned out wonderful. Exactly what we're going to need on this aircraft. That's going to suck the wings in just beautifully. So guys, last thing to do on this aircraft is the name change on the canopy. So we're going to be sanding down our two names here and installing the same names that we did on the F-14. So that's the last thing we need to do. All right, and as we are plugging away on changing the names here, we're really close. So I didn't record any of the process here, but basically sanded the old names off, resprayed the gray, made our stencils out of vinyl, put them on. We've got the same ones on both sides, and now we are ready to paint the new black. So we're going to paint the black pull everything off, do a bit of weathering on there, and then put the flat clear over top, and it matches perfectly. So that is going to be awesome. And we also got a cool shipment in today. So let's take a look at what's in the box. Now I know what's in the box, but I didn't have any idea when this was going to show up. So this is going to be kind of neat. So merchandise stuff for the channel, guys. I have done some hoodies and things like that over the past while, but what I decided to do was sign up with Spring. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you scroll down, you'll see a bunch of merchandise stuff. And this is the first thing that I ordered was our hats. Got JETI. So we set this up in the Spring website. Nice hat, actually. I'm surprised. I was worried that it was going to be kind of a crappy no-name hat. So anyways, we got a nice snapback hat, and yeah, it turned out nice. Happy with it. So there's also some shirts and hoodies down below. When you look at the pictures of the shirts and the hoodies, it looks like it's a huge, big logo on the front. It's not. That's the logo on the back. The front is just small, kind of like this. And just so you guys can see here, it's actually a really nice quality hat. I'm quite surprised. It's 80% acrylic, 20% wool, which is awesome. Very, very cool quality stuff. So there it is. That, very cool. So if you're interested in some merch from the lighter side of RC, easiest way to order it is just down below, and saves me having to make it, deal with it, and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, guys, there it is. All right, and our names are done, installed, and weathered. So once the names were on, I peeled off the masking, and there was a bunch of little pieces left, so I just pulled the little pieces out, and then took my airbrush with some black, or with the same black in there, and just did a really kind of dusting over top of it all just to fill it back in, because when we repainted this gray, it was all shiny and brand new and clean. The weathering on the aircraft obviously adds that dimension to it. So. All right, now I was going to put the names on my F4, but it's already been sold. So congratulations, Antonio. Antonio reached out to me and said he was interested in buying my F4 at the end of the 2023 season. So we struck a deal, and it's his. So we're going to be able to maiden that thing down in Montana. So I'll probably fly it at 1 or 2 events this year, and that's basically going to be it. So again, congratulations, Antonio, and thank you for letting me maiden this for you as well too. Looking forward to it. So. All right, and as a last step here, guys, I went through at the same time, and I just did a bunch of paint touch-ups that we were waiting on, like we talked about in the previous builds, around the leading edge of the vertical stab light, and just little things here and there. A couple missing little gray spots on the hatch, and a little bit of black here and there. So, but she is done. All right, guys, and that wraps up the build of the twin Skymaster build series. These were very rewarding planes to put together. They were a whole new challenge, and definitely some interesting new experiences along the way. Love the look of these planes, just them both lined up together. They look awesome. Really, really impressed. So congratulations, David, on your new F4. It's end of February, 1st of March, so we've got a while left to wait to fly these things. It's probably going to be near the end of May when we maiden them, but really looking forward to it. Just touch base on a little bit of the JETI stuff that we got into. Now, those are just ideas for programming. On the nose wheel, as an example, with the extension, you can have it set to a time limit. So you could set it up where the nose extends for 10 seconds and then the air valve turns off. You just have to go through all those conditions and think about it. The chute layout that we did, that I showed you in the videos, we're going to also set it up a little bit different as well too. So again, always just ideas, learning. There's way more ways to set up the aircraft, especially with the JETI system. So thanks guys for following along with the build. Really happy to be able to do these, and it was a great experience. So hopefully in the future I can kind of see myself maybe getting one of the larger versions of the F4. Yeah, I think that would definitely fit well in the stable, but we'll see. And that's it guys. So thanks for watching. If you followed along and you look down below and you're not a subscriber, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, and that's it. So thanks for watching, and we will see ya in the next video.